So welcome to our last session, our last seminar of VEX VRC, a strategic approach. Hope you guys have had a good time to kind of, go through our previous content. Now we're on to our last stuff. Before we begin, for those of you guys who are new, welcome to VEX VRC, a strategic approach. This is going to be our seminar where we kind of break down, VRC. And all our previous seminars are available on our YouTube channel. So if you kind of missed some of the previous ones, I would definitely recommend you go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/user/systemic solutions, and go to one of the playlists. It's got all the videos from our previous seminars. Super helpful because these do kind of build on top of themselves, and they do have a lot of different content every time. So would definitely recommend, going through that stuff. There we go. Yeah. So there's that. My name's Afnan. Nate was with us last week. I totally forgot. He's not going to be doing it this week, but my name's Afnan. I'm going to be kind of leading the session with you guys. Nova Systemic is where I work, and they're pretty cool. Kind of biased because I work there, but yeah, I think they're pretty cool. They do a lot of different things, everything from STEMinar, so that's what we're doing right now. There are a bunch of other seminars on 3D printing, rocketry, cybersecurity going on. They also do summer camps, and so these summer camps for this year are actually going to be pushed to online because of our COVID-19 scenario, but we still offer them. So, still great opportunity to stay engaged during the summer and maybe get a little bit more one-on-one help with, VRC, specifically this year's game change-up, or, if you want to branch into cybersecurity and learn a little bit about that, learn a little bit about 3D printing, machining, manufacturing, whatever it might be, there's something we're doing, there's a camp for it. Robotics tournaments, so we host pretty much all the robotics tournaments in Northern Virginia. So everything from the signature event night at the museum to the state championship and a lot in between. We're probably behind those events. And anything else STEM related, we're definitely involved. We have different coordinators for every region and a lot of different resources available. If you have any questions about those resources available in those regions, or if you're maybe not in any of those regions but still would like to have some sort of support pushing STEM in your region, definitely email systemic@nvcc.edu and we can try and work something out so we can provide STEM towards your area, right? So remember, a brief overview of what we're going to be doing in these seminars. Our overall goals are still to learn how to break down VEX games. We're still going to be forming strategies, and we're still practicing critical thinking, so we're more prepared for next season. And the way we do that, same as always, breaking down one meeting per game, reading some rules, watching some gameplay, and trying to understand why some approaches are better than others. So, today's plan, what we've got in the notebooks for today is expanding your knowledge base. So, some recommendations and justifications as to why you should be expanding your knowledge base during the summer and how I would recommend approaching that, as well as documentation and why it's important, my recommendations for documentation, and then breaking down a game. I don't know why that went back, and some discussion, Q&A. You know what it is. So let's start with expanding your knowledge base. So the justification for expanding your knowledge base, let's just talk about before we get into the examples of how you can do that, why do you want to do that, right? So consider using the summer to kind of expand your knowledge base and the school year to do this year's game. And so that's an interesting dynamic that is different than what a lot of people do. A lot of people go, okay, we're competing at our state championship. We made it to Worlds. We competed at Worlds. Now the next season has already begun. Quick, let's start, pen and paper. Let's start drawing for this year's season. And, that does give you a little bit more time to grind. And as we all know, VEX Robotics is a function of just how much time and effort you put into it. That's whatever you get out. There are some times where you want to take a step back and spend some time doing reflection and that type of stuff, right? Because, where is this? Yep. So the reason you want to kind of spend some time doing that is just because that prevents you from getting into the cycle of constantly working and never really learning from your work. And so a good example I can think of is I know teams who build the same thing every year, right? I've seen a team literally build a chain bar every single year. And that's not because that was their best idea as to what plays the game the best. That was just because that was the one design that they had done the first season. And, it works. And they're like, oh, we don't really know any other design. So we're going to keep building a chain bar and make it work. And so, they got really good at building chain bars across 2 or 3 years, but they didn't necessarily see an improvement in their performance. And that was because they didn't spend some time saying, hey, maybe we should learn how to make a reverse double 4 bar and then worry about this year's game. It's important to do well in this year's game, but also expand your knowledge, your base knowledge your knowledge base and the different skills you have, right? Because if you never try something in some sort of safe environment, you're never going to get the opportunity to take advantage of it in a more competitive, high stakes environment, right? So definitely would recommend using the summer to, do this year's game, not necessarily do this year's game, but work on learning different designs. Oh, I've never built a 6-bar before. Cool. Let's spend the summer. Let's learn how to build a 6-bar. I've never programmed, multi-process before. Cool. Let's take some time. Let's learn multi-processing. Let's do it. Yep. So there's that. It's always important to try and learn from previous years. So, before you just, chalk that last year up and say, hey, we did whatever we did, let's move on to next year. You definitely want to try and learn from it because, throughout that year, I'm sure you saw a lot of different things. This year, for example, at the end of this year, I'm sure a lot of us are going to be doing reflections on, well, what did, COVID-19 really mean for us? And what did this social distancing really mean? How are other ways we could have done work that we never thought of, but had to do, right? A lot of things you didn't think of you could do at home, you didn't think you could do mobile working, are now kind of becoming required. And so now that you have this knowledge, next year you could consider, hey, maybe we don't really need to, be at the school to get work done. Maybe we don't need to spend, 3 hours a day after school in that one location just so we can get robots built. Maybe there are other better ways to do that. So it's important to try and reflect on what were this environment and scenario of last year and, how can you get better? Because some teams do have toxic environments. Some teams have environments that don't, pan out across long terms. They don't have longevity. And if you don't spend the time to think, hey, student A and student B were on the same team last year, and all I really saw was them butting heads and not really being able to press forward on a design. Maybe I want to, separate them. Maybe I want them to spend the summertime doing an exercise together to see if they can work together. Spending a little bit of time to prevent you from kind of running into the same mistakes and same errors you ran into previous years. So we definitely recommend, taking that summertime for that. Okay, so my screen share paused for a second. Never mind. It's also important to try and get new people up to speed. So a lot of teams, every organization has new people. They need new people to continue the organization running forward. But a lot of problems that come, a lot of the problem that comes with having new people, it's not really a problem. It's just they're new. That's part of what they are. They just have not experienced VEX robotics before. And so if you just kind of throw them into the season trial by fire style, saying, hey, here's your first competition, go for it. Hey, I need a 6-bar built by the end of tomorrow, go for it. That's going to be really hard for someone to say, hey, well, I don't really know all the parts and pieces yet. I don't know how these things go together. I don't even know how to some people don't even know how to turn a screw, and that's fine. Everybody starts somewhere, but you should definitely try and take that summer and, instead of pushing people right into the game, spend, maybe even just half the summer, spend some time just so you can get people up to speed so that they can feel more comfortable during the actual season when time is of the essence. When it's summertime, kids don't have classes, you kind of can do whatever, right? You got a lot more free time and flexible time. You should spend it learning so that when you have, really tight amount of time and say, hey, we need to build a reversible 4-bar for this game, you're like, oh, I did that during the summer, it wasn't great, but at least I have some experience, or I know where to find resources for that. So it really helps people get up to speed just by, giving them some mock scenarios and some some sort of safe environment scenarios where they can do work, right? If a kid's never been to a tournament before, maybe have a mock one. Maybe, push them and say, hey, I've never seen you guys, use mechanism wheels. Do you guys know how to use mechanism wheels? Do you guys want to try and program them for the first time? Maybe they'll become a good resource or great tool for you in the future. So I'm definitely trying to expand the knowledge base through that. If you don't expand your skill set, then you stay where you are as others get better. And so that's the example of the team with the chain bar I was talking about. Building a chain bar every year, they got really good at building the chain bar, but they didn't necessarily get better as a team. They didn't put up more points. They just knew how to build the same design, but better. And that didn't really help them because, they never, some games don't need a chain bar. As cool as it might sound, some don't. And so if you don't ever expand your skill set, you're never going to be able to do more things. You're just going to be stuck doing the same thing where other people are expanding. Especially nowadays, we've got our social medias, we've got, the VEX, we've got forums, we've got Discords, we've got all of that. So knowledge goes really quickly, really far. So you definitely want to, try and pick up that knowledge and pick up that expansion of your skill set. So understanding how hard others' jobs makes it easier for you to work with them during the year. So, this is a good example of walking a mile in somebody else's shoes. During the summer, maybe you're the programmer. Maybe you could, all you really like to do is code. Maybe consider taking a month of the summer to try and build, right? And just see what it's like. Just to see, hey, maybe you have really good ideas. Maybe you got a good knack for it. Or maybe you really don't like it at all. Whatever it is, you should at least give it the opportunity just so you get some exposure, because that can definitely help you understand where people are coming from during the actual school year. There are a lot of times where somebody who's doing code might be like, hey, these people never have the robot built. Why can't the rest of the team just get the robot built quickly so I can practice my autonomous, for a week before the competition? And, the reality of the situation might be, well, it's actually hard to build a quality robot and, have it built robustly and well. And to get that appreciation, that understanding of how difficult is it actually to do that, you kind of have to walk a mile in their shoes. So, having people who normally work on hardware, tell them to work on software for a bit. Have people who work on software, give them a shot at hardware. Have the role reversal just so people can, instead of arguing during the season, they could understand, oh, well, when I did it during the summer, it was kind of hard for me, and I couldn't really even write a hello world code. I couldn't really get the robot to move forward. So I'm going to, respect the fact that the other person's job is difficult and give them some time to do the work they need to do. So there's that. And, that people are going to have videos showing the robots posted by like roughly September. You might as well use the time wisely until then. So if you think about it like this, right? By September, we see a lot of posts, a lot of action on the VEX forum. We see a lot of, RI3Ds. We see a lot of different examples on the internet and like Instagram, YouTube, all of it. They're covered in people showing off the robots, the designs, the strategies, the things they thought of. And, if those people are going to be posting that information anyway, and that's information that maybe takes you 10 minutes to think of anyway, right? You might as well save that time save the time that you would have spent finding that information first and learn, right? And then you can overcome some of that, like some of the initial like learning curve by looking at those resources. To provide an example, I guess I would say, for this year's, for Tower Takeover, we had the Goofy design, super popular, became a lot of the meta. It was a lot of what people did. And that was released really early in the season. It was it was an RI3D. So like literally 3 days afterwards, right? If that RI3D was already released, definitely you would have had more examples by September. You would have seen some gameplay. You would have gotten to see a lot of East Asia play their game, and you would see how the game plays. That's fine. That's a lot of information that takes you a lot of time to get, or like a lot of time to develop on your own, but now it's already readily available for you. Now what you can do is say, hey, I'm going to spend the summer, I'm going to learn new designs, I'm going to learn new techniques, new strategies, and then when the school year begins, I can, instead of spending a month figuring out what's a good way to build a robot, I can at least have some sort of example to reference. I can say, hey, well, this year's game needs to have a large tray capacity. Here's an example of the Goofy robot I saw. Maybe we can do something similar or something better. And so you've saved yourself time. You didn't have to kind of reinvent the wheel. You just referenced somebody else's design and figured out how to make it better. And you also weren't like, you didn't spend that time twice, so to speak. You didn't have to spend the time designing the tray and then, oh, well, darn, the Goofy design already even showed us how to make the tray. All the time I spent was kind of wasted, right? So if you know those videos are going to be available, you should definitely take advantage of them and save yourself time by maybe not working on the game immediately and giving it some time for people to post some content just so you can get some ideas going later and a lot faster. So there's that. So here's some examples of how you would expand your knowledge base. Analyze and build robots from previous competitions, right? So not even necessarily, the competition of the last year, maybe 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. Go back a little bit and, look at, well, I saw that this year's game requires picking up balls. So if we're talking changeup, oh, we're picking up these like 7-inch balls, is it? Maybe I'll look at toss-up because they had similar buckyballs that were a lot smaller, but they were still balls, roughly the same material. Maybe I'll figure out how they pick up. Look at those previous robots. What robot won that year's game? Maybe I can reverse engineer. Maybe I can figure out how does this mechanism work because that mechanism made them so much better. People who a lot of the time you want to look at your world champs, look at your skills champs, look at your signature event champs and see how did they achieve what they achieved. Maybe there's some specific mechanisms, some specific implementation of their mechanism that helps them do better, right? You should kind of be looking for that. And then watch and break down some old gameplay, right? So a lot of way to get a good game sense is to just see other robots interact and how they do their work. It's really beneficial for you to go back and say, even if it's a different game, you can still understand that, oh, that's a really interesting way these guys chose to play defense. I didn't think about it, but playing defense at, when there are only 15 seconds left prevents your opponents from scoring. So if we're talking Tower Takeover, maybe you could have watched some gameplay, from at the museum, and you would have saw how, oh, well, when you're going to score in your unprotected zone, your alliance partner has to set a pick for you so that you can prevent your opponent from playing defense on you. And that's a small detail, but seeing that in practice helps you come up with another strategy that, oh, well, maybe we could do that. And that would prevent our cubes from being knocked over whenever we go to score. So resources, I would definitely recommend you use Cut to the Bot and, look at different review videos. And if you're not familiar with Cut to the Bot here, I can go ahead and escape. All right. So Cut to the Bot is a great resource. I would definitely recommend it. Let's go here. Let's go Cut to the Bot. Cut to the Bot, super cool resource. It literally just has a bunch of videos from Worlds just cut to the match video, right? So I could say, hey, going through my playlists, I think they have a playlist here. Yeah, so they've got 2018 VRC finals, 2018, VRC middle school, 2018 VEX U, 2017, 2017, 2015, 2016. They've got a lot of different resources that are literally just videos of robots playing matches, right? So what I could do is say, hey, let me go to robot events. Let me go to the World Championship, and let me find the highest score from the 2018 World Championships. Oh, it's on match number 37. All right, let me go to Cut to the Bot. Cut to the Bot says, oh, match 37. Boom, there it is. And you can actually watch the gameplay and have students or have yourself break it down. Understand why some decisions were being made the way they were, and try and say, oh, what did they do in the first 10 seconds? Okay, what did they do in the next 10 seconds? Okay, how do they respond to an opponent playing defense? Did they try and play defense right back and just get into a pushing fight, or did they did they do like a spin move, turn on them and move away, or go to score somewhere else? Understanding that's kind of a really helpful way of getting better game sense. You're breaking down the game, you're seeing other people play, and you're getting better yourself because you now understand, well, this is a way I could avoid defense. This is a way I could, score points faster or be more efficient in my skills routine. So definitely would recommend, even if you just go to YouTube and type in Night at the Museum, I always recommend it because it's some of the highest tier play you're probably ever going to see. Night at the Museum, super high tier play, would recommend. But yeah. So, Cut to the Bot reveal videos. There's so many reveal videos out there. Not all of them are good. Like some robots reveal themselves and I'm like, I don't know about that, Chief. Definitely take whatever you see with a grain of salt. People are only going to show you their top tier, whatever they got. So if it says this robot was scores 1 million points, then maybe it only scores 1 million points once out of 100 times. Take it with a grain of salt, but definitely look at it to understand what are some things you can be expecting or some cool designs you can pull off yourself. Do mock tournaments. So this is pretty big. You get a lot of students who are new to VRC, and they're like, you send them to the first tournament, and they're kind of just like, oh, I'm going to my first tournament, and there's so much that goes on. There's a lot of knowledge to take in. You might have somebody be overwhelmed. So if you have somebody you send them, maybe they didn't know they needed to do judges interview. Maybe they didn't know, oh, well, after the qualification matches, they're actually elimination matches. And that sounds like a really dumb thing, right? Like, how do people not know that? But that's I mean, you got to think about it. Everyone starts somewhere, right? I've definitely refereed events where we hit a line selection and someone who's like the 5th seed just went home because it was their first event and they didn't know that after the qualifications there was an elimination bracket. They just thought they were playing in like a league or something. So it definitely helps to do mock tournaments and even set up example scenarios. Let's say that you give the student the scenario of, hey, you're the 2nd seed, the 1st seed is better than you, and the 5th seed is the person you want to pick. What should you do? Or that you have this type of robot, the opponents have this type of robot. What do you do? Giving these matchups helps you be more prepared for alliance selection, for scouting, for planning matches and stuff. Definitely helpful. Additionally, there's a lot of things that students tend to take advantage of, or I guess take for granted, really. For a good example I can think of is when I went to a tournament, my first tournament by myself. My coach wasn't there because there was another tournament that the other half of the teams were going to. I totally forgot to do some basic things. I didn't set up our table. I didn't, charge our batteries. I didn't do any of that because I'm normally used to having the coach do that. And as a result, halfway through the tournament, I was like, wait, why are my batteries all dead? Why is my controller dead? What the heck? And it's a small thing, but it helps, right? Having that sense of responsibility that I know when I go to a tournament, the first thing I do is set up my pit. I make sure that everything is on charge. And then I take my robot, I take it to inspection, step A, step B, step C. And I know these steps and I have a list or whatever it might be. Making the student knowledgeable about the fact that, you need to do these steps in this specific order is super helpful because it provides them that level of independence where you don't need to micromanage them. And that's really obnoxious for you to have to do, right? You don't want to have to walk around and go, oh, where is the B team? Always forgetting to plug in their batteries, and oh, where is this team? Always forgetting to get inspected. Giving people these example scenarios where they kind of need to just say, okay, you're going to walk through the door into our robotics room and you're going to pretend it's just a tournament you walked into. Go. what is the first thing you do? And they go, obviously, oh, well, I need to set up the pit. And you're like, oh, did you think about checking in? Did you think about, putting things on charge? Did you think about making sure you have all your tools before the car leaves? Whatever it might be. Definitely would recommend it, because, putting yourself through those examples and scenarios is how you kind of do some training. Practice interviews before the day of the actual competition. Please do that. Nothing is more awkward than, you get to your judge's interview and they go, hey, can you tell us about your robot? And you're like, can I tell you about my robot? It has wheels and it does stuff. I've literally seen interviews where someone's asked, could you tell us about your robot? And the student went, whatever it does, it doesn't do it well. And I was like, why is that something you would say? Like, why, what tells you to say that, right? So please practice your interviews before you get there. It's super great to just be more knowledgeable and like prepared for it. Just because, there's things that you don't expect. Some students just like go to a competition and they totally forget that they're a part of the team, maybe because they normally spend their time in the stand, maybe because they do whatever. Sometimes they just forget. Things I would definitely recommend are, if you're doing these, practice interviews, please practice, getting questions that you don't know the answer to, because that's going to happen, right? I can't spoon feed you everything that you're going to know because you know the answer. I don't care if you know the answer because I know you know it, right? I care about what do you do when you're put in a scenario when you don't know the answer. That's a really important thing. During at Worlds, when I apply for, the judged awards, so if I'm applying for a design award, if I'm applying for an excellence award and I have my interview, then what that means is before Worlds, I've spent at least 2 weeks practicing that interview. That interview is something I spend a week or 2 practicing, and more than just like, lightly, let's go through it. I do, hey, let's pretend we're talking to a judge, go bottom up. So-and-so, do you know where to begin? So-and-so, how do you continue? So-and-so, go ahead. Okay, my turn. Now I'm going to talk. And we practice this dynamic, right? Because it goes a long way to know, when do I speak? When do I not speak? And make sure I'm not like looking at memes on my phone when other people are talking or busy. These are small things, but they go a long way, right? And make sure you divide speaking time equally. Nothing says, there's something wrong here when person A and person B really just say one sentence, and then person C says, oh, and these are the wheels, and these are the intakes, and these are the lifts, and these are the that, and this is the that, and this is the strategy. It looks kind of bad on you when only one person answers all the questions. And yeah, and Leanne mentions body language counts when you face a judge. It totally does. If someone comes up to you, the thing I do when I practice, right, my interviews is go, okay, here's what we're gonna do, guys. We're gonna pretend a judge just came up to us, go. And when I say go, the rest of my team knows that means we stand in a semicircle, 3 people to the left of the robot, 3 people to the right of the robot. We shake our hands, we say our names, we introduce our roles, and we go, hey, my name's Afnan, I work on the code on the robot, boom. Hey, my name is Ryan, I work on the design, boom. Hey, my name is so-and-so, I work on so-and-so, boom. And we do that, right? We understand that when we go into a judge's interview, that means 3 people stand to the left of the robot, 3 people stand to the right of the robot, we semicircle in, we curl around the judge, and then we talk, left to right. And that's an understanding we have. Just because we practice that, right? And it seems like a small thing to practice, but it comes off so clean. And we make sure no one's on their phone, everyone's kind of standing up straight, everyone's like looking at the judge, no one's like, oh, look at that over there. Like we're focused, right? We're taking the interview because we want to. Yeah. Please don't hide behind your robot. Yeah, that's the thing. People just kind of like dig their face in there, and I'm like, dude, you're talking to me, you gotta kind of stand out there, please. But yeah, please practice your interview before the actual day of the competition. It goes a long way. It can make your interview a lot clean. And even if you just do small things, right? Like small things like saying, hey, Tyler, you're in charge of talking about the base. Jenny, I want you to talk about the intake. Thomas, I want you to talk about the lift. And Paul, you're going to talk about our code, and I'll talk about our strategy. And we'll do it in that order, right? And just having some sort of like clean transition, like, oh, blah, 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 blah. And that's why we have these wheels. Tyler can talk to you about whatever he's going to talk to you about. And then, that handoff, it's really clean. It's not like confused, all that. Maybe practice like, if someone asks you who works on the code, if you work on the code and someone goes, hey, could you please tell me about the strategy? Well, you're on the team. Your job is to understand a little bit of everything about the robot, but you might not be the person who understands, the best thing about the strategy. You might not understand every single detail about the drivetrain, right? In that scenario, maybe you can practice. Like if somebody asks you that question, what do you do? Maybe you tell them, hey, well, on a high level, this is what we do. Our strategy is to, you know, play starvation early game, and then in the late game, we score as many points as we can, as quickly as we can. And, you know, that's a quick, you know, brief of the strategy. But if you want more details, you can talk to, you know, you can talk to Jean, because she led the strategy talk and she was the one who was like in charge of that. Yeah, so make sure you kind of take some practice, get ready for that. Give yourself challenges. So a great way to, like, you know, get better is to just put yourself in scenarios where you need to get better, right? So see if you can see if you can, like, you know, do a one motor intake. See if you can do a one motor lift. Giving yourself that sort of hardware challenge says, well, now I can actually spend some time practicing this, right? You've never had to do this before, but it's just a part of a thing that happens. And yeah, you know, Shelby and Leon mentioned, make sure you know your entire team is there who's going to be presenting, and if they can't make it, let the judges know, like, hey, you know, we've only got 3 out of 5 people here today because 2 people are sick, or, you know, 1 person's at the restroom right now, or, you know, provide that explanation. Yeah, so that happens, right? But make sure you give yourself challenges during, you know, that summertime where you can expand your knowledge base. Because if you spend, you know, that summertime saying, hey, let's see if we can make a one motor intake, then, you know, maybe 2 years from now, you don't need it immediately, but 2 years from now, there's a game and you come in a scenario where you need a one motor intake, right? But that's good because you practiced making a one motor intake 2 years ago. So you already know how to do that, right? Giving yourself those type of challenges puts you in a scenario that says, hey, I need to think creatively and make something new. Maybe you can try making a transmission from the lift to the drive. It might not be necessary for that year, but it's good practice to have, because, you know, that's something you can take advantage of in the future years. Yeah, so, you know, challenge yourself to program a new sensor or a new control methodology. So, you know, if you've never used a line follower before, go ahead and use it. If you've never used a camera sensor before, try and use that. You know, get some experimentation and play just so you understand how the sensors work. So if you need to, you have the option to, but you're never going to be there a week before states saying, we really need to detect these balls, but I don't really know how to. I've never used the camera before. I've never used the line follower before, so I don't know what I'm doing. Like, you know, give yourself that opportunity to do some practice in a controlled environment so that you can take advantage of your knowledge when you need to. A great example I can think of is, you know, during the summer, let's say that you've never programmed with a specific library. Let's say you've never used Pros before. You've never used a copy. You've never used VEX code. Take some time to learn it, right? Take some time and say, hey, I want to understand how this works, so I have the opportunity or the option to use them. You don't have to use it, but you have the option now. Yeah, heavily recommend, you know, learning how to use every sensor. Maybe you want to learn how to do things multi-threaded, learn how to use notification, learn how to use multitasking, you know, do that type of stuff. Spend some time practicing. Definitely would recommend. Any questions on that? Press on. Cool. So, so documentation, right? Let's talk about our documentation. Really big part of robotics, heavily justify it. Every team should have an engineering notebook. Like, that's just a thing you should have, right? It's a really big part of your design. Understanding that, you know, VEX Robotics does try and get the best competitor, but it's also a lot more than just the best robot that scores the most points, right? It's how did you get to that point? So having an engineering notebook directly leads to more awards and more chances at Worlds. Only 1, or I guess 2 robots really end up as tournament champions, right? There's only going to be 2 tournament champions, but you can easily go from being one of those 2 robots to being maybe one of 3 robots if you have a notebook, maybe one of 4 robots if you also, you know, spend time on your interview. You directly increase your chance of going to Worlds by having an engineering notebook. So I would definitely heavily recommend you have some semblance of an engineering notebook, right? It's great practice for the professional world. Like, that is just something that's going to happen in the professional world. You need to keep track of the work you do and keeping track of how that work got achieved or why you made certain decisions. And so having an engineering notebook is great practice for that, because you have to sit there, you have to break apart, you know, what decision did you make? Why did you make it? And what is your plan for the next week? And that's going to happen, you know, in the professional world. Look to other online examples for inspiration, but don't copy paste. I would, you know, definitely recommend going online and just looking up different type of notebooks. It definitely helps you, right? Like, going online and seeing, well, how did somebody else do it? It's not just like difficult thing you've never done before. It's like going online, seeing an example, provides some semblance of something you can do. And here, let me see if I can provide an example now, right? So as you guys might know, the REC has a lot of resources. They super provide them for you, right? Is this it? So if you literally just like Google, where is it? RECF engineering notebook, you get this like kind of sus looking link. It does look kind of sus, but when you click on it, you get this, right? It's a sample engineering notebook from like 2015. And so you can definitely go through it and see like, oh, here's an example of how to get the table of contents down. Let's go down a little more. If this loads, please. There we go. Yes, it's loading. So, go through and say, oh, here's an example of, oh my God, so many contexts. Aha. So here's an example of, a good design decision, or how we made the decision for this. Here's an example of how to break down brainstorming. Here's an example of, how to go through all this. So, these brainstorming designs, it's a good sample, right? You can go through and you can understand what is a good example of doing something, right? What is a good example of brainstorming and documenting brainstorming? What is a good example of making a decision matrix? What is a good example of just a notebook that you should have, right? And, different concepts and all that, we can kind of go through all of it. There are 155 pages here, so it's not like the whole thing, but it's a great sample for you to go through and say, hey, I've never written a notebook before, or I've never, tried making a reflection section in my notebook. Let me look at this sample and see how good it is. I would definitely recommend it. I'm kind of biased because it's my notebook, but it is what it is. I guess it's our team's notebook, but definitely biased there, but whatever. Shameless plug. You are correct. Anyway, yeah, so definitely would recommend. But yeah. Yeah, also write clearly so judges do not have to guess. Yeah, please don't. If you know somebody writes in chicken scratch, consider having somebody else write a little bit more than they do. But yeah, yeah, so having, so look at online examples, but don't just copy and paste. And the reason I say don't just copy and paste is because, when you're in that mindset of just, taking what someone else has and putting it on yours, you kind of lose the justification or the meaning behind why you added that. You miss the reasoning for, well, they had a section that talks about evolution, so we're going to have a section that talks about evolution. And, although that's good to add those sections and have that other details, it's also helpful to like, understand why that's being added. Yeah, and that's a great thing. Like Oscar recommend having a scratch notebook, and that's really good. If you have a scratch notebook, you can kind of outline what you want your like submission or your, what is the term, like your entry to look like. And then once you're like, oh yeah, this looks like a good way to approach an entry, boom, I can take that entry into the actual engineering notebook. That doesn't mean write the whole entry twice. That just means, take that entry, maybe bullet point out what you want to talk about. Oh, I'm gonna have 2 pictures and all that. Maybe do that. Do I think multiple people should write in a notebook or just one? Okay, so that's like the polarizing topic that people have had. Some people say everyone needs to write in the notebook. Some people say, well, only one person should write in the notebook. From my previous experience, I've only, I've made it so that everyone is required to participate with the notebook. Not everyone is required to physically write in the notebook. And although that sounds like only one person is writing the notebook, only one person physically writes the words in the notebook because it's like they have the best handwriting and everyone else writes in chicken scratch, for example. But also they're able to kind of, they're kind of the project coordinator for the engineering notebook. They lead the development on that engineering notebook. And so when they lead the development on that engineering notebook, they're able to more directly say, hey, so-and-so, I need you to outline the entry for this date. And they can physically write the entry, right? Or, they have somebody say, hey, I need pictures, I need this, I need that. They can lead the project. And although they're physically writing the words in the notebook, the content of the notebook is a result of everyone's participation and contributions. Outside I can understand. Yeah, so make sure everyone understands your notebook. Make sure your notebook isn't written in some I don't know, hieroglyphics or some notation that you didn't explain. Like if there's a yellow star somewhere, make sure you explain what that yellow star means. It's a team effort for the notebook, and you have to make sure that everyone's participating in that. You need to use ink in your notebook. Yeah, so pencil is, maybe you can outline in pencil and then write it over in pen, whatever you want to do. I always write in pen, but it definitely is a team effort that you should make sure everyone's participating in, because nothing feels worse than, being the person who's like stuck doing that without anything else to do. You want to make sure, you're helping your team. One one color per person. Yeah. So Oscar mentions, maybe you could have one color per person, and that way the judges know you're having a lot of participation in that. Draw and sign the notebook. Yep. Always have affirmative signatures. Yeah. So witness on every page. Yep. So please use tabs. Yeah. So Leanne mentions that, and that's a big thing. Tabbing out your engineering notebook is a thing you can do to break down the sections in your notebook. Everything from what is it? From these are brainstorming days, and these are math days, and these are days where we do reflection, and these are competition reflection days, and this is our decision matrix. Like having those quick tabs. So let's be real. When you gave your engineering notebook to the judges, they might have all of 2 minutes to read your entire notebook, right? And your entire notebook might be 200 pages. They're not going to read every single word across 200 pages. But if you tab out specific sections, highlight specific things that you want the judges to pay attention to, then that'll more directly focus what they're looking at. Otherwise, you might just get, some judges who kind of flip through and go, oh, cool picture, maybe some math, maybe some strategy, 3 out of 10. You definitely want to make it a guided experience so no one's going into your notebook blind. Yeah. But yeah, so having a lot of pages doesn't necessarily make it better, but having tabs does make it better because you can break down what's in there, right? So make sure you have your own style in the way you only do this. So when you're doing witnesses, make sure secondary witness. So having an engineering notebook is also a great point of reference for future seasons. And so if you build a design 1 year, and then 1 or 2 years later, you need to reference some, you need to make a similar design, or you need to be, hey, the team, the so-and-so who graduated or is not on the team anymore, they were on the team when we built this cool design, and no one else knows how to build a cool design. Maybe if you have a notebook, right, they should have documented that cool design so that you can go back and say, hey, this is how you build that design. We need these parts and these pieces. Or, hey, this is an example of the code that they use. So now we can also understand how to do that. This directly helps you pass knowledge down throughout the course of multiple years, right? Because you're writing in the notebook, or so-and-so's writing in the notebook about the design, and then 4 years later, that design needs to be re-referenced. Or maybe even later in the same season, that design needs to be referenced, right? Having an engineering notebook says I can look back at a specific date and say, hey, this is how that design worked. Now someone else can take advantage of that knowledge. They don't have to reinvent the wheel every time. Yep. So, it's super great point of reference for future seasons. It also provides a way for everyone to stay engaged. So remember, like I said, the engineering notebook is for everyone. It's not just a one-person job. Even if one person is writing the notebook, everyone should participate. So that means that, it may be so-and-so is in charge of taking pictures, and so-and-so is in charge of, writing the bullet points for the notes, and so-and-so is in charge of physically writing the things down. Make sure that you've got a cycle there so everyone has some way to stay engaged, right? And it can also help you think through your decisions with the robot with objective facts. A lot of time we get in the habit of saying, well, last year everyone used 6 bars. Let's just use a 6 bar again. And, you might just take that for granted, that you just make that assumption. But having an engineering notebook lets you, okay, let's have a decision matrix here. Let's figure out which is actually better. Oh, well, we thought that a 6 bar would be better. But if you compare it, to all these other options we have, a 6 bar is 4 out of 10 overall, but a double 4 bar is 7 out of 10. And that's so much better, right? Or, 6 bars is really easy to build, but a double 4 bar gets taller, and we need height this year, so we're going to build that. Having that pen and paper definitely helps you make more kind of focused decisions on that. And it's great, like I said earlier, it's a great experience for the professional world. You just want to be used to it. It's going to go a long way if you're able to break down your thoughts and ideas into specific points and kind of push your thoughts, right? You should be really good at advocating for your thoughts, and also just being able to understand what your thoughts are and put them down and express them to other people. So some brief recommendations, these aren't all encompassing, but try and make sure your notebook explains what is happening, why you did what you did, how did that work? If it didn't work, what did you do and what did you learn? Make sure it's a complete cyclical process. You should say, hey, this was my idea, and this is why I thought this would be a good idea. And, this is how we implemented the idea. And, it didn't really work, but we learned that, we need to be more careful when we're doing spacing for our robot design, or we learned so-and-so. And, the next iteration is going to be this. Having that rough process breaks down every single step of what you thought of while you did it. You didn't necessarily, you didn't sit there and say, oh, well, what is this and what is that? You didn't necessarily sit there. Maybe you just kind of jumped to the end. You said, oh, well, we need more spacers here. We need less spacers here. Okay, let's take a step back. How did you make that decision? How did you recognize that, that was going on? Oh, well, the metal pieces were bowing out because there were too many spacers in there. Okay, cool. So now we've added a thing, right? So we recognized the metal was bowing out because we had too many spacers. And to fix that, we're going to take a few spacers out. Okay, so how in the future do we prevent this issue from happening? Oh, well, maybe we could, use cchannel to make sure we're using, exact lengths and not just kind of eyeballing lengths. Okay, and so now you've got like a little bit of everything, right? You explain the problem, you explain how you fix the problem, you explain how you learned, you explain how you're going to press on forward from now on. That's the whole process right there, right? So that's really good. You should try and separate your notebook from others and do some things only you guys have. So the way I thought about it was like, everyone's got a notebook because everyone should have a notebook. Well, if everyone's got a notebook, why is mine better than theirs? How do I separate my notebook from their notebook, right? I want to have some sort of X factor, something that's like really, really kind of different to the to what other people have. Yeah, I mean, like Lan mentions, there's a rubric there. You can definitely read the rubric and make sure you're hitting all the points, right? If the rubric wants you to make sure you're explaining about previous designs you've had and you're showing that this is an iterative process, maybe you want to add a specific section to help you explain that this is an iterative process. Here's plan A, here is robot B, here's robot C, and here's how they improved over time. Yes, thank you for linking the rubric, Oscar. Yes, so definitely would recommend giving that like a peruse and maybe a good read. It's definitely helpful. So is that, if there's some thought or event about the team or robot, then it should probably go in there. When I write when I think about engineering notebook, I think about kind of like a project notebook. Like if there's something that affected if there's something that affected your robot, you should probably put it in there. And whether that be, oh well, we dropped our robot and broke all the axles or something, and that delayed us another week. That's an important thing to mention because the delay of a week means you might not be able to get your autonomous done, or you might not be able to, progress forward for some time. So it's definitely important to, anything that affects your robot design should probably be put in there, whether that be, we saw this YouTube video and that gave us some inspiration, and we're actually now going to change part of our robot based on the YouTube video. All right, maybe take a screenshot from the YouTube video, print that screenshot out, put it in your notebook, and say, hey, here is an example of something we saw on the internet. Here's the link for that. I think that we're going to, make our robot more like this. And here's a picture of the robot after we implemented that change. If it affected your robot, definitely include it, right? There shouldn't be any gaps in why your design went from A to B to C. So this is important, right? Your engineer notebook walks them through the design process, and the design process should explain why at the beginning of the season you had robot A and why at the end you had robot B, right? Or C or D or whatever iteration you're on. Maybe you're on Z. Maybe you have to use 2 letters because you changed so much. Whatever it might be. But you should definitely be able to kind of walk the judges and walk anyone who's reading that through it. It shouldn't just be a guess as to, well, they had a 6 bar this week, but now they have a reverse double 4 bar, and they never really said why. You should always be explaining, well, we recognize that the 6 bar it gets the height and the reverse double 4 bar gets the same height. We want a linear lift. And so the reverse double 4 bar would be better because it doesn't, lean out and up. It just goes straight up. And that might be the reasoning, right? But you should explain that reasoning. Use a different notebook. Yeah, so maybe if you do a lot of outreach, maybe use a different notebook for that. Because remember, your notebook is supposed to be directly focused on the design process. So like I've used binders, and in my binders I say, hey, well, there's a physical hard copy engineering notebook, and in that is everything about the design. The binder is about our outreach. The binder is about all the other things that encompass our team. So would I say the design process guides the notebook, or the notebook guides the design process? That's an interesting question. I would say that, your design process should guide your notebook in the sense that your notebook documents everything you did, right? And the design process is what you're following for your team, and the design process is what you're following for your notebook. So for your notebook, excuse me. And so, if whatever design decision you make should be reflected in your notebook, and maybe, if you're making a decision, make sure you have some way to document the reasoning or the rationale behind it in your notebook. So definitely, whatever design process you use, that should guide what goes in your notebook. Yeah, and if you have multiple notebooks, please keep them together. Just because, judges can't always know, like, oh, this is part A and this is volume 2 and this is volume 3. So please be helpful there. You know, add details but not fluff. So this is big, right? Some people will just like write every single thing that comes to their mind in their notebook. Like, oh, you know, at 3 p.m. during practice, so-and-so took a restroom break, and after they came back from the restroom, they started playing with the C channel, and then after that, they did this, and after that, they did. Like, these are unimportant details that are irrelevant to the design process. You should not include them. And one thing you can think of is like bios, right? So bios are cool. Bios, you know, tell people who they're looking at, but they're not necessarily an important part of your design process. So if you're gonna have bios, cool. Maybe put that in something else, like a binder that has like a bio section. But that engineering notebook is about the engineering design process, right? You don't need to have extra fluff in there. Yeah, so try to avoid having like a bunch of just like top of the noggin stuff. So, but bios are a part of project management, and I definitely agree. They're really important there. But you know, maybe you want to include those in a section that's more like towards the project management. The way I approach notebooks is, you know, I have a binder, and that is my project binder. Everything about the project is in there, but the engineering notebook is specific to the design process, specific to the robot, right? Yeah, so should be at the beginning of the notebook section. So maybe you can have it there. Yeah. So, and again, you know, there are differing opinions on that. You can definitely go with whatever you're most comfortable with. There's no point in copying and pasting someone else's approach, but I would definitely recommend, you know, just being careful as to when you add random fluff and when you're adding detail that's relevant. So preview design and ideas are better and justify them. So there should be some sort of math, some sort of reasoning, some sort of logic that says, hey, this is what we picked, and this is why it's better than the other opportunities, the other options that we see on the board, right? So make sure you're able to kind of like justify that and have a process to streamline the work. You know, doing the notebook is a lot of work. It takes a lot out of a person to do, and definitely have some way to streamline that. An example I can think of is, you know, we had a shared Google Drive where, you know, the Google Drive would have folders for the month, and inside those folders would be more folders for every meeting. And every meeting folder had at least 2 to 3 pictures of what we did, right? And our mindset was, well, if there's not a picture, then it didn't happen because you can't prove it happened, right? So definitely do physics calculations. Calculus look really good in the engineering notebook. Yeah. So definitely, you know, whatever math calculation reasoning you did, like for nothing but net, right? One thing we did was we looked at, well, how much force does it take to, you know, shoot a ball from the protected zone all the way into the goal? Or, you know, how much weight are we lifting? How much force does it take? How many newtons do we need outputted from the motor so we can lift? Oh, that means we can get away with a 1 to 5, or we can get away with a 1 to 7. You know, these justifications, you know, you might know in your head from previous experience that a 1 to 7 is the ratio to use. But now you have to prove that, right? Like, you can't just be like, well, probably 1 to 7, you know, probably 200 RPM. You can do some math and figure out, well, this is exactly why it needs to be 200 RPM. It can't be 600 RPM. You know, you can justify that. So go ahead and, you know, whenever you get the chance to prove or explain yourself, take that chance. Any questions on that? All right, so let's get into our game breakdown. We only have like 10-ish minutes left, so it's going to be a little rushed. I apologize, but let's start. We're going to do in the zone, auto zone. But yeah, so sponsor us. Yeah.
The world's greatest 2 minutes in robotics. The 2017-2018 game, VEX Robotics competition, In the Zone. In the Zone is played on a 12-foot by 12-foot field by 2 alliances, one red and one blue, each made up of 2 teams. The object of the game is to attain a higher score than the opposing alliance by stacking cones on goals, by storing mobile goals in zones, by having the highest stacks, and for parking robots. Cones stacked on goals are worth 2 points. Parking robots at the end of the driver control period are worth 2 points. Mobile goals scored in the 5-point, 10-point, and 20-point zones are worth 5, 10, and 20 points. The highest stack achieved on a stationary or mobile goal is worth 5 points. There are 4 places where an alliance can achieve a highest stack: the 3 scoring zones and the stationary goal. There are a total of 8 mobile goals, 2 stationary goals, and 80 cones in a VEX Robotics competition in the zone match. Each robot will have 1 cone available as a preload prior to the start of the match. Each alliance will have 12 cones available as match loads for drive team members to place on the loader during the match. Each match begins with a 15-second autonomous period where robots score without help from their drivers. The alliance that scores more points in the autonomous period is awarded with 10 bonus points added to the final score at the end of the match. The 1 minute 45-second driver control period begins once the autonomous period bonus winner has been determined. At the end of the driver control period, after all objects and robots have come to rest, the match will be scored to determine.
All right, so that is our. Why is it 10 and not 6? That's just a different autonomous bonus. You know, different years games have different autonomous bonuses. So let's talk about that, right? So from our video, we can quickly see, first of all, there's two main scoring objects, right? So we're talking mobile goals, MOGO, and cones, right? So that's the thing that we're going to be following throughout the course. We're also seeing how, you know, well, if you look at it, you know, what do we got? 80 mobile goal, 80 cones, they said. So we've got cones, we got 80 of them. Mobile goals, we have only 1, 2, 3, 4 we can actually score. So, you know, mobile goals, we only have 4 we can score. And then, oh yeah, we're talking bonuses. So we've got our bonuses for being the tallest. And so there are 1, 2, 3, 4 bonuses you can technically get, each being 5 points. 4 times 5 points. So there are a lot of points on there, right? So looking at this game, what I'm seeing is, you know, we're definitely talking a game about lifts. Definitely looks like it's going to be a lot of lifting, a lot of height. What I want to understand is, you know, we have to put those mobile goals up. We have to pick them up from the ground and put them onto their respective goal zones. So I'm definitely going to have to consider, you know, how heavy are these? How many motors do I want to contribute to doing that motion? Additionally, you know, it looks like 5, 10, 20, what, like that was the 20-point zone, 10-point zone, 5-point zone. It seems like you can get a lot of points just by putting those mobile goals in there, not even by having cones on there, right? So that's something to consider. You know, it said we needed to start with a preload, so another thing to consider how I'm going to work with that. Cones being on the ground, that's something to consider as well. So, you know, the orientation of a cone is very easy to pick up when it's upright. Might be difficult. So, you know, cones, easy to pick up when they're upright. Really difficult when they're laid down. They're down. I swear that says down. Don't worry. Yeah, so let's look at this, right? The first thing I want to do, pull up some rules. Let's go through it. Let's do some math, right? So going through here, we're going. Da, 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 da. All right, so real quick, let's do some math, right? 90 scoring objects, 80 cones, 4 cones, and 1 per robot as preloads. Okay, so 24 cones, 12 per match load, 52 at the start. Okay, so that's some interesting thing right there, right? So if we're doing our max score, and so let's insert page after. So let's try and get a rough idea of our max score, right? Because that's the first thing we want to do, just to figure out what points we should be shooting for. In our max score, there are 80 cones, but we only have access to 80 minus 12 because our lines or our opponents have 12 match loads, and minus 2 because, you know, the opponents have their preloads. So that's 66 cones we like really have access to, right? So 80, it's really just 66 cones we have access to. So out of those 66 cones, you know, each one is worth, 2 points apiece. So at 2 points apiece, we're talking 2 points there. If we look at our mobile goals, we can get 20, 10, and 5 for those. And so we have 4 of them. But what it kind of looks like to me is I kind of don't want to put anything in that. You have 24 free points in just match. Yeah, 24 free points in just match, so that's important. Additionally, I don't want to put anything in the 5-point zone. Like, from looking at this, right? Let me go to the scoring section real quick. Scoring, here we go. So, you know, 2 points for the cone, mobile goals, 5 points, 10 points, 20 points, and then highest stack is 5 points as well. But if I have the highest stack in the 5-point zone, I get a 5-point bonus. That's just 10 points, right? So that's me gambling points. That's me gambling there to possibly get 5 bonus points when I could just put it in the 10-point zone, right? So that's kind of like, why wouldn't I just put it in the 10-point zone? To me, that tells me that the 5-point zone, totally useless. I'm never going to try and put anything in the 5-point zone unless I've got like 2 seconds left, right? So 20, 10, I don't want to ever use the 5. And from looking at the field, you know, here we go. So from looking at the field, we can only really fit one mobile goal. Even the video shows like, hello, video? Yeah. So the video, looking at it, it's like, there's no way I'm going to score more than one mobile goal in that 20-point zone. And from looking at it, they have 2 in the 10-point zone, but I feel like we can easily squeeze 3, right? And the way we prove we can squeeze 3 is a little bit of math here. So I already have all the math up here. Let's just boop, boop, whatever. So essentially, if we look at it, right, we're looking at this like this 20-point zone. It's got that one bar that goes across diagonally across the 24-inch tile. So we're really looking at what is it? 24 multiplied by 2 to the 0.5 power square root. We're looking at 33 inches. We've got 33 inches to put like stuff in there at the small end of that trapezoid that defines the 10-point zone. And you know, 33 inches. The area of the trapezoid, yeah, I guess we could technically get the area of the trapezoid, but I'm just concerned about the horizontal space we have on the narrowest end, because that's going to be like the narrowest space we kind of have to put mobile goals, right? Because if you technically take the area, that includes those like triangular small portions there that can make it look like you can score more in there, but you really can't because you're limited by the horizontal aspect, right? So looking at that, you know, 33 inches, and I think they said mobile goal is like 10 inches. Mobile, yes. Nope, that is not what I wanted this time. A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I, mobile goal, aha, conical, 10 inch. So at 33 inches, you know, you can fit, so if we remember correctly from playing the game, we know that we can fit that, but now we've just done the math to prove we can fit that. So that's something we put in our notebook, right? We just show that we did the math to prove that we never need that 5-point zone ever. So boom, automatically tells me 5-point zone, totally useless, not going to do it. Unless I don't have like any time, unless I'm like super strapped for time. So there's that right there. Additionally, you know, so back into our max points. So that means that we can do 20 and then 10, 10, 10. So that's easily like, I'm getting 50 points out of that. That's a lot of points. What that also means is that like, I would expect everybody to have 50 points at the minimum, which means at the minimum, every match I play, I need to score 50 points, or I can guarantee I'm going to lose that, right? Because if that's so easy to get, it's just one object. I don't even need to stack any cones on it. I could easily make something that just like spends the entire match picking up mobile goals and scoring them. So the minimum points I should score every match are 50. And so, you know, 50 is there. All right. And we've got our bonuses. We've got technically we've got like 4 bonuses, right? Because you can get them out of the 5-point zone, but we already said we're never going to go for the 5-point zone because we're essentially going to get that 5-point bonus just by putting in the 10-point zone anyway. So that means the 20-point zone, the 10-point zone, and the neutral goal, that's 3. So 5 points times 3 equals, you know, 15 points to be had there. So 15 points to be had there. You know, so I think that's oh, and parking. Excuse me, parking. What is their parking bonus here? A robot park at the end of the match is worth 2 points. That's not a lot. That's like 2 points. I don't know how I feel about that. That's like 1 cone, right? It seems like it would be a lot more beneficial to just pick up 1 cone and put it in there. So I don't know how I feel about that. But I'll go ahead and put that there. So park, you know, 4 points for 2 robots. Yeah. So it's 2 points multiplied by 2 robots. We got 4 points there. And then auto, huge. Auto is 10 points. And that's pretty interesting because 10 points is 5 cones. That's quite a few cones, actually. So, you know, 10 points. So let's add that up, right? So we've got 66 multiplied by 2. We've got 50. We've got 15. We've got 4. We've got 10. I'm looking at a max of 211 roughly. And, you know what we do with the max score? We cut that in half. We go 105. Boom. 105 is now my goal. I will, yeah. That's true. Yeah, parking is really easy last second. But yeah, 105 is my new goal. That means that every match I play, I need to aim to get at least 105 if I want to win. And then, you know, you kind of think about that, but that's not right. That's actually not right if you think about it. Because 105, if you subtract, you know, 50 points from that, because that's what you're getting in mobile goals, that's 55 points that you need to score in cones and bonuses. But if you have 55 points in cones and bonuses, you know, divide that by 2, that says I only score 27.75, so 28 cones, which doesn't sound right off the bat, right? Because they're 80 cones. And if I'm scoring less than half, you're telling me I'm going to win by default? That doesn't sound right. So here's an important thing to think about in this math is that although yes, that's technically like, that's like our maximum achievable score, you really need to understand that maximum achievable score is super important when the game objects are not, given designated colors, but because the mobile goals are given designated colors, right? And me scoring all my mobile goals does not prevent my opponents from scoring all their mobile goals. I can't take that into consideration. Like I need to be really thinking about that when I'm doing my maximum score, right? Because I score my 4, that doesn't prevent them from scoring their 4. So that doesn't really like weigh into max score, the way it normally would. So if I look at max score, right, that means that I'm going to pretend that, both of us score all our mobile goals and we just make that, the new 0. The new 0 is 50. So I'm not even going to include our mobile goals in our maximum scoring because those are assumed points that I need to get every time, right? So now if I kind of rerun that math, I would really need to say, hey, well, there are 80 cones total available. And then, I have 15 points from bonuses for, I mean, even the parks, like if I get a park, that doesn't prevent them from getting a park. So parks aren't too big out of the points I want to steal. And then, auto is 10. Nope, just going to erase that, whatever. 10 points for auto. So if I look at that, right? Well, first of all, if there are 80 cones, I want to get 41 of them. That's over half. That means that, by math, they can't beat me. 15 points, right? So 41 multiplied by 2 gets me 82. If I add 15 to that and then I add 10 more, I get 107. And that means that, if I can score roughly 41 cones and do that in the correct orientation, I can get 107 points from cones. That is my goal because I know everyone's already going to score those mobile goals, right? So now here's where the math comes in. Well, how high do I only have 4 mobile goals and I need to score 41 cones, right? And then of course there's that neutral goal too. So that's like 5 scoring positions that I need to get. I need to figure out what is the height my lift needs to be able to achieve so I can score 41 cones. And if you do some quick math, 41 roughly 40 divide 4 10. So I need roughly 10 cones per. How high is that? All right, well, let's look at where is the appendix that I had open a second ago. Aha, nope, that's the wrong one. Oops. Here we go. Yes, so every cone I add on top of another cone is 2.75 inches or more. So now I can do, what is the height of the base cone? Where is it? So where's the cone? Where's the cone? Cone, yes. So the cone is 7 inches in base and a base down. Okay, so it's approximately 7 inches tall. So, that means 7 inches off my, 10 cones? So 7 and then plus 2.5 times like 9, roughly like 29, 30 inches. That's some quick math. What I can do is actually on the forums, if I can find it. I had this here a second ago. Yes, somebody posted this super awesome link that has cone equivalencies, right? So if you look at it, right, 36 inches is 10 cones when it's on top of a mobile goal, right? Because I totally forgot to count for the height of a mobile goal. But now that we have that, right, so yes, on a mobile goal is 4.8 inches. So if I added 4.8, yeah, it would be 34, 35, yeah. So roughly, we know that if we're getting 10 cones, right, that's 36.36 inches. At that 36.36 inches, I can guarantee I can score 4 on the stationary goal, right? What that means is 10, 20, 30, 40 on mobile goals and a potential of 4 to 5 if I can kind of squeeze it out on stationary goals. So that's like really good, right? That means that I can easily achieve 41 and I can make sure to get that bonus on the stationary goal. Because, I mean, a stationary goal seems to be really hard to get just because it's already so much higher than the other goals. So, maybe 4 to 5 is okay. Additionally, in my strategy, when I'm looking at these, looking at the game video, if we can move these mobile goals, then I most definitely want to carry that mobile goal with me, right? I don't want to have to run around, get a cone, run back to my mobile goal. That seems inefficient as heck. I definitely want to I definitely want to bring that mobile goal with me. And if you think about it, right, if I have a mobile goal with me and I score it in the 10-point zone and I go, oh no, well, or actually, let's say before I even score in the 10-point zone, I see that my neutral tower has 1 cone on it, but the opponent's neutral tower has 3 on it. I can use my mobile goal that I'm carrying as a mobile stash of cones and just take a cone off my mobile stash, put it onto the neutral zone, right? I can just do that. And having that type of motion is like super beneficial, right? I don't have to run around the field, pick up cones and bring them back to the neutral goal. I now have a mobile stash. So maybe what I want to do is, in the strategy, well, once I put something in that 20-point zone, I'm never getting that back out there, right? So I want to make sure that whatever I put in my 20-point zone is always greater than my opponent so I can get that bonus, right? So maybe I want to max out in the 20-point zone. On the 20-point zone, I want to put 10 cones. And then, the 10-point zone, I can maybe get it back out. I want to consider, yeah. So, maybe I want to say in the 10-point zone, what I'll do is when I put the first 1 or 2 mobile goals in that 10-point zone, I don't put that last one in yet. The first 2, because you can only get the bonus off of one of the mobile goals on there. So like the 2 mobile goals that I put in that 10-point zone, or out of the 3 that I'm going to put in there, I can maybe put, 5, 6, 7 cones on there. And, on that last mobile goal that I have, I can have maybe like 10 or 15. And so, yes, that does mean my robot needs to be a little taller. But what I can do if I do that is that 10 or 15 tall mobile goal is now my mobile stash, because I'm going to take 5 cones off of there and I'm going to put them on that stationary goal, right? And I'm like, oh yeah, if I put 5 cones on that stationary goal, I can totally get the bonus there. And then I still have the bonus in the 20-point zone, and I have the extra height to then add more to that one mobile goal on my 10-point zone to get me that bonus. So that's how I lock those bonuses in. What that means is, okay, well, maybe I need to make a lift that'll get me, I want to get, let's say 5 cones. Okay, maybe I want to do at least a lift that gets 40 inches, just because that gives me enough safety to guarantee I can put the 37-inch on, and, I can get to maybe 11 cones tall. So some considerations to be made. Now I have an idea of, okay, how high do I need to lift? I know how much things weigh. I know, what are we going to be looking at? I have some rough idea of what's in my head for that. And I know what points I'm going to try and achieve. So that's definitely big, right? To do all that math there and kind of understand what you want to get out of it. So that's like a really quick math breakdown of that game, right? That's not even me looking into the specific rules of, what you can and can't do during autonomous. Spoiler alert, there's like no holds barred on autonomous in that year. So, if I look at it, my autonomous, right? There's no autonomous line. I could very easily say, well, dang, I totally, ran out of time to write an autonomous. So my autonomous is just going to ram them. Technically illegal strat, frowned upon, technically legal. So like, if you're at your starting bar and you realize like, oh no, I know that these guys can score high. And that's one thing you want to be paying attention to in your scouting, right? Is in this year, you want to pay attention to height. How high can they score? Because if I know they can only score, 7 cones tall, then I know I don't need to put 10 in my 20-point zone. I could put 8 in my 20-point zone and I'd be fine. So, definitely a good thing to keep in mind. Yes, chucking a cone across the field. Maybe you want to take your preload and you say, hey, I don't want to score my preload, but I'm definitely just going to throw it in my opponent's path. XD did that. I think Aura did that. They were super ready to do that. So, it's definitely a strat you can take advantage of. So, maybe if you know that your autonomous isn't better than your opponent, you might just, say, hey, well, my autonomous isn't good, so I'm just going to mess up their autonomous and we're just going to take it back in driver control. Totally possible. Maybe you understand, maybe you know that your opponent's going to do that and you don't want them to know which way you're going to go during autonomous. So what do? Maybe you just face your robot at that neutral goal and say, hey, I could go either left or I could go either right. And now my opponent has to guess which way I go. Totally possible, right? And you get like a 50-50 chance out of there of getting out of that alive. So definitely would recommend. All right, so that's like a really quick breakdown of the game. One thing I want to do is I want to watch 2, maybe 3 videos and just break down what's going on. One of them is a reveal video, and I'm going to preface this. I don't want to say that I'm tearing apart the robot or saying anything like, it's bad, but I want to show you a design decision that was made that, might seem okay, might seem like, different in a sense, but from my perspective, I would not understand it. So we're going to be looking at, quick reveal here. Oh, I don't need music for that. But yeah. So, and I'm going to go ahead and play this like 1.75 speed because a lot of it's just filler. But so we're looking at, robot gets some good height. Okay, so a claw to pick up the cones. Yeah, somebody that can pick them up only when it's upright. That's fine. Reverse double 4-bar seems legit. But then, okay, they're picking it up, but it doesn't look like they can pick up that mobile goal. And that's what kind of confuses me, right? Is how are you gonna, maybe you can't pick up the mobile goal. I see some mechanism in the bottom area right there, but looking at that, they're scoring, they're doing an okay job. And on the back, you can see it. On the back, you can see their mechanism for scoring on their mobile goal is opposite to their mechanism of picking up that mobile goal. And all that, although that seems like, that's a cool use of motors. You don't have to use motors. You don't have to use motors to pick up the goal and to score. Well, it seems like an okay use of motors. Like you're kind of saving a motor there. But look at that. Like you can't pick up the mobile goal while you score, right? You're going to spend more time trying to actually, run around the field, getting cones, and then bringing it back. And the fact that you're now using your lift to pick up the mobile goal is kind of inefficient, in my opinion, right? Because your lift needs to only lift up cones. It does not need to be strong enough to lift up a whole mobile goal because they're different weights, right? There's disparity in their weights there. That means that I would need to make my lift strong but slow so that I can pick up the mobile goal, but also fast to do multiple cones at once. Those are two opposite things, right? I'm not achieving speed in my scoring if I do this. So definitely, although they did that, that's a good way to save motors. So you now don't need dedicated motors to picking up that mobile goal. You do now have a slower lift as a result. And that's going to be a bit of a problem, right? Especially when you're trying to score in that 20-point zone. Maybe it's not strong enough to get up there, or maybe your lift starts to burn out. Maybe you're having some problems there. Definitely something to consider. Additionally, it looks like they're just using axles to kind of like work as outriggers, which are, I guess, effective, but definitely would not recommend. Oh, sorry. What time is the meeting? This meeting technically ended like 10 minutes ago. I'm going over a little bit, so I apologize. We're just going to watch, let's say we'll watch one more video, and then we'll call it good. Okay? I apologize. I guess I can't show the XD video, but would recommend watching the XD video just because they're so good. Lucas Derigic, super good at that. Totally mispronounced his name. I apologize. All right, so we're gonna watch our finals to see what we're gonna. Let's go start with our autonomous. Oof, did I already skip autonomous? All right, so we've got 15-second autonomous. So you see everyone's going for their mobile goals, and immediately, everyone's getting those cones in a line just because there's gonna be so easy to score there. And look, one person only puts in the 5-point zone, one person puts in the 10-point zone, that's 20, and another in the 20-point zone, right? So off the bat, somewhere they've got what 1, 2, 3. They've got what 1, 2. So you can see someone's going to get that 20-point bonus, and that's going to be really important, or that 5-point bonus on top of the 20-point goal. So it's going to be really important going in. They did it really quickly so they could get the points in there. Additionally, we're seeing one of the mobile goals is already down, so that's going to be a little difficult for an opponent to pick up a mobile goal. But for the most part, these designs are focused around carrying the mobile goal with them, which is an important consideration we realized. And, we're looking at seeing if we can get the cone really quickly. So all these considerations we were making, these were the considerations made at the highest tier of play. We've got some defense being played, trying to prevent people from getting into their zones. That one red robot is just spending its time knocking over those blue mobile goals. And although, that does take an extra second for that blue alliance to get that mobile goal, it also takes away from the red's time for scoring. So, definitely an important consideration to make is, do you want to play defense? Do you want to be offense? Yeah, and knocking over the mobile goal, definitely intentional. It's a defensive strategy, but here you see it, right? So we're going from our mobile goal onto our stationary, or onto our neutral. Stationary is the term, I think, onto our stationary, because that's the fastest way to do it. And look, now they're using their mobile loads their match loads. On their match loads, they're just going 1, 2, 3. You can easily overcome an autonomous loss because only 5 cones overcomes an autonomous loss, right? Just from there. But it's kind of important to make to realize where are other people placing their goals. So what are we seeing? We're seeing mobile goals going out from the stationary. And that's kind of how the match is ending, because those are guaranteed points. You want to do them last, right? You want to take points off the field first and then say, hey, now that we've taken enough off the field so we can win, we're going to put our own in. And they put it in that 5-point zone. Like I said, I don't understand why anyone would. Maybe it's too high, maybe it's too heavy, too risky to put in the 10-point zone. And I get that, because they might not have enough space in there. But as a whole, that's what we're seeing. So auto buffer helps. Yeah. So definitely, a good example of when you want to be picking up match loads. If you have match loads, you can use them at any time. Maybe take them at the end of the match so that you can play some starvation early game, right? And understanding those in your match loads are guaranteed points. You can get them anytime. Autonomous wins championships. Yep. Who won that one? Final score 150 to 85. So looking at that, 150, 85 red handedly. Yeah. So if we, red's got a pretty big stack. They've got all their goals. If you look at that, blue really is kind of slacking there, but yeah, red definitely got that. So, but yeah, so I think that's gonna kind of conclude it. Unfortunately, I can't go any further into breaking it down. We are running a little tight on time, but yeah, pylons are solid that year. So, spoiler, red won the second one. Yep. So yeah, that's definitely it. So thank you guys for joining me throughout this series on VEX Robotics, a strategic approach, and maybe hopefully you got to understand and learn something